So up until now, then we've been looking at the instructions for beginner's meditation and what is called the instructions for stabilizing the mind. And up until this point, then we've been discussing some important issues, like first setting your motivation before practicing, the importance of posture, and using the breath to calm the mind before you engage in the main practice. And now I would like to introduce your first outer object of meditation. As I've mentioned before, that it's important to work with objects of meditation, first with that which is more coarse, and then eventually developing a meditation practice based on more subtle objects. An example of a coarse object is a stone, for instance. A stone is something very stable and unchanging that we perceive to be a real outer object, and it does not have a lot of variation or movement, and so it's easier for the mind to be tethered to an object like this. And what I mean by ever more subtle objects, well, for example, a candle is a much more subtle object than a stone, and likewise meditating on water or meditating on empty space is also more subtle than meditating on a stone. Eventually, we develop the ability to meditate on imagined objects, things that we imagine in our mind or visualize. Now, what all these objects have in common is that we use these objects in order to tether the mind. And as I've said before, then a primary purpose of our meditation practice is to develop this tranquility or peace of mind, and along with that, to develop this mental acuity. Mental acuity is the ability to place the mind intentionally on an object and for the mind to remain fixed on that object without wandering. But initially, it's important to use outer objects. Outer objects, for example, like this stone. Because of their nature and that they do not waver, it's easier for the mind to remain fixed or stabilized on that stone. Whereas an object like a candle, for example, then that flickers or moves, it changes over time. And then more subtle objects like the wind or air, for example, are even more difficult to place the mind. And the reason why we progress like this is because we need to develop stability. And in order to develop stability, then it's important to practice in a progression from that which is more easy to that which is more difficult. And there is another aspect associated with meditating on outer objects, and that is their natural element. For example, a stone represents the earth element. And as we know, the earth element is very grounding. So, for example, someone who has a very airy personality, where the mind is not easily fixed and tends to wander, then meditating on an object like a stone is very useful. It helps to ground that individual. It helps them to achieve stability. Whereas other individuals might find that a candle or water is more suitable for them. But the way that you come to understand which objects are better for you is through developing experience, that is meditative experience. And so the recommendation is to progress in a systematic manner through the various different types of objects. Now, of course, we don't have to use real outer objects for meditation. As I said, we can use visualized objects, but these are very difficult to stabilize. If you yourself try to imagine a stone rather than look at a stone that is really sitting on a table in front of you, then it's much more difficult to hold that image in your mind. And so, in order to develop skill in our meditation, what we do is we start with these stable and coarse objects. Now, the way we use these coarse outer objects does not differ significantly. Initially, we need to sit in our posture, and using the breath, then we stabilize the mind. We place the stone or the bowl of water or the candle, etc., on a table that is more or less level with the eyes or just below the line of sight, so the head is slightly tilted down. In some traditions, then they have this tendency to look down at the focal object, for example, as looking down on a low table like this. But in our tradition, then we keep the focal object just below the line of the center of the nose. and at a comfortable distance, so one can see the object easily, but likewise so that it is not too close that the eyes become strained or crossed. Having placed the object in this way, then the first instruction is called placement, or engaging. And so this means to direct your attention, for example, at the stone. Looking at the stone, then we try to remain focused on that without being interrupted by thought. Now, of course, normally thought will arise. We will become distracted. We will remember the past or think about future plans and projects that we need to engage in. But the purpose of this meditation is to fix the mind on an object intentionally. So we're using the stone or the candle much like a tether or an anchor to keep the mind in one place. Of course, when we don't have experience in meditation, then it's very easy to become distracted. As many of you will know from practicing on focusing the breath, it is quite common to become distracted and lose count after only 3 or 4 breaths. And so, what we need to do is repeat our practice often and for a short time. If we try to do too much at once, then it's very easy for the mind to become tired, bored, or irritated. If at first you set your goals too high, it is possible that you will become despondent and give up on your meditation practice. As I said before, then it's very important to set a schedule. That means to meditate regularly at a particular time of day and for a particular duration. But at first the duration should be quite short, maybe only 5 or 10 minutes. And in those 5 or 10 minutes, then you should make repeated attempts at focusing on your object. And so, once the mind is placed or is focused on your stone or candle, the next thing to do is to sustain your awareness of the object without distraction. After some time, what you will notice is that you have become distracted. Often, as beginners, what happens is that we are looking at the stone and then suddenly we realize that we have drifted off. We've started thinking about something else, something that happened in the day, and we haven't noticed that we become distracted. Now, this third instruction is that at the point of recognizing that you have become distracted, you merely bring your attention back to your focal object. It doesn't pay to focus intently on that object, to force yourself to look at it. It brings upon a lot of fatigue and also makes meditation rather unpleasant. It is much better to remain relaxed and continue your awareness on the object without straining. And then, once you recognize distraction, is not to get involved in a lot of thought. For example, thinking, I shouldn't be distracted. I was told to remain focused on the object. I have to push thought away and return my mind to the stone. That only creates a proliferation of distraction. All we're doing is creating more thoughts to get in the way. The instruction is merely to return. Now, by repeating this process over and over many weeks and months, one develops a habit for the mind remaining fixed on the object. When we're interested in a particular activity, we don't have to force the mind to remain with that. For example, when you're watching your favorite TV program or sport that you enjoy, then the mind naturally remains with that because there is interest. But at first, when we engage in an alien activity, like trying to force the mind to remain focused on a static object that has no particular interest, then the mind has this tendency to rebel. And you don't have to get worried about the mind becoming tired or bored or rebelling against you. You merely have to habituate yourself to keeping the mind stably focused on that object. And often, it's only once one begins to realize the beneficial effects of meditation that one generates greater enthusiasm and interest in the practice of meditation. And so, at first, it's something that you need to persist in. But likewise, as I said, if you force yourself or you create a lot of strain in trying to remain focused on something when the mind just keeps wandering, and then it's quite likely that you will develop an aversion to meditation. Meditation should be an enjoyable activity, and so it's very important to choose a time of day where you're able to sit. Sometimes it's better to get up early when everyone is still asleep and enjoy some personal quiet and stillness. Once you get a taste for the experiences of stillness and peace in the mind, then it will become increasingly easy to engage in your practice. There are many physical and mental benefits that arise from the meditation practice, but unfortunately, until we gain some personal experience, it's difficult to realize the results. Likewise, if we don't have a personal instructor or teacher, it's easy to fall into bad habits and to be led astray or go down a wrong path. So the advice is to find a center near you where you can get instruction and guidance in your meditation. It is true that online there are many different instructions for meditation, but when a beginner tries to apply these to their simple meditation practice, it can often be counterproductive. For example, many teachers say, there is no meditation to do, there is no practice, you just have to be with what you are in the present moment. The problem is, many of us don't have enough experience in our meditation to even understand what this presence means. And so, as I said previously, in terms of this Tibetan tradition, and what we do is we start with what is easier. On the basis of that, we develop a stable practice, and one that is founded in joy and enthusiasm, and not based upon hardship and self-punishment. Of course, we hear the stories of the masters of the past, who went into caves and engaged in ascetic practice. And even if they try, all that happens in the end is that they damage their health, and in the end, they never develop any enthusiasm for spiritual practice. So my suggestion to you is that you try this out for yourself. Try it out and see if you can identify the beneficial effects of meditation in your daily life. What you should feel is that you become a more calm person and also one who is not so easily upset by external circumstances. And once you gain personal experience of these benefits that arise from meditation, then you yourself will develop a faith or belief that this practice can bring about beneficial results. Of course, in the end, it is taught that meditation leads to liberation and the experience of permanent and unchanging bliss. But this is very difficult for most people to accept. In fact, it sounds like some mythical tale, some story about heavenly realms. Whether or not the experiences of eternal bliss are an analogy or metaphor, or whether it relates to something that can occur in our daily lives, is very much something for you to decide and to find out for yourself. So good luck in your practice, and thank you for listening to my instructions, and until next time, then see you later.